So this week's portion is Metzora, and it's not that common actually to have Metzora on its own. It's often paired up with Tazria, and it does continue pretty much in the same vein as Tazria. Tazria and Metzora both have to do with Tzara'at, which is a disease, and it's commonly translated as leprosy. It can also be understood to be perhaps a mysterious disease, a scaly disease that affected both the skin, and Metzora talks about how this disease affects a person's home. It's interesting to think of a disease as afflicting house. We don't tend to think of diseases being on a house. Maybe you can have a contagious household, but that's people, not necessarily the house itself. And so it talks about the process for purifying the house, as Tazria talked about purifying the person who becomes tameh through ritually impure through being afflicted with tzaraat. So it talks about this process, and it talks about determining whether the house can be purified or not. And in some cases, if it cannot be, then you basically have to demolish the entire home, not use a single of those materials to rebuild. You have to completely get new materials to build the house back up. It's a very interesting part of this portion. But I think if we take a look at this part, I think we can sort of reconceive tzara'at as afflicting a household. I think many of us, if any of us are homeowners, I think we know the plagues of having a house. Sometimes things can afflict your household. Your household can be afflicted with things like black mold or pests, or even having your air conditioner broken down can feel like your household is being afflicted. And when that happens, it is pervasive. It's hard for you to think of much else. It affects your stress levels in a way that a lot of other things in our daily lives don't. So your household can be afflicted, and we do understand what that means. And I want to also point out that Sara'at is actually the etymological parent of the word tsuris. And so tsuris, if you know from the Yiddish, it means worry. And so we get worry when our households are afflicted like that. We get all kinds of worries in our daily lives. So I think we can understand that if you have tsuris in your life, you feel like you're afflicted. You feel like you're in a state where you don't feel perhaps like you feel like your soul is being weighted down, right? You may not feel as pure and as light and unburdened as you might otherwise feel. So we can understand that the idea of this portion is about being afflicted, right? So and we have the idea from this portion that we have the power, we have the control to raise ourselves up out of being afflicted, right? Through the process of, well, for when you have tzara'at of the body, for quarantining yourself and then going back in, and the Kohanim help you to ritually purify yourself, and you offer a sacrifice. Similarly, when you leave the afflicted area in the home, and you bring in the Kohanim, and they determine whether the house can, whether that affliction can be lifted or not, and hopefully it can be, because we don't want to have to rebuild a whole house. So you have this opportunity to lift the affliction and come back to a state of feeling more whole, more ritually pure. So we do understand this portion, I think, today in a different way than what it is laid out in the Torah, but I do think it is still relevant to our lives. And so I encourage us all, if we find those afflictions, I think we find ways to purify them. And I think this is especially relevant right now as we're prepping for Pesach, because we go through spring cleaning and we're taking our entire households and we're sort of in a way purifying them because we're preparing for Pesach. So I think it's a very wonderful connection that we have between this week's portion and as we prepare for Pesach.